I walked into the grand dining hall, heart sinking the moment I saw the crowd. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, but their brilliance only highlighted the emptiness I felt inside. My parents were already standing near the center, grinning like peacocks, and my brother was leaning casually against the marble fireplace, soaking in the attention. As soon as I approached, the conversation shifted. My mother's voice rang out loud and proud. And of course, everyone has to see Jeremy's new 4-bedroom mansion. Laughter and applause erupted around me, the kind that wrapped around him like a warm blanket while I shivered on the outside. I forced a smile, nodding politely, trying to disappear into the wallpaper. Then came the question that cut deeper than any words before. "And what about you?" All eyes turned to me. My stomach twisted, cheeks burned, and a hollow sense of inadequacy settled over me. For a moment I wanted to vanish, to escape this room, this family, this judgment. But beneath the shame, a quiet flame sparked. I clenched my fists beneath the table, a silent vow forming in my mind. They would never underestimate me again. No applause, no praise, no mansion could define my worth. I would make sure of it. Later, I retreated to the quiet of my bedroom, closing the door on the lingering laughter and chatter downstairs. The walls felt suffocating, but they also gave me space to think, to breathe, to confront the swirl of emotions inside me. I thought about my parents, about the way they prized appearances over substance, always elevating my brother as if his worth measured their own. Their laughter, their bragging, their constant comparisons, it all replayed in my mind like a cruel highlight reel. Anger simmered beneath the surface, sharp and bitter, but it was laced with a deep sadness, a recognition of the years lost to their favoritism and hollow praise. I remembered countless times I had been excluded, overlooked, or dismissed, while my brother received every advantage, every opportunity, every pat on the back. The unfairness gnawed at me, but alongside it grew determination. I refused to remain a passive spectator in the hierarchy they had created. I refused to let their narrow definitions of success dictate my self-worth. I imagined a life where I would no longer feel FOMO, where I would be seen, recognized, and respected, not because they acknowledged me, but because I would rise on my own terms. And in that quiet room, I made a silent promise. I would reclaim my power, even if it meant proving it to no one but myself. Over the next few weeks, I began paying closer attention, not to plot anything immediately, but to understand the terrain I was navigating. At another family gathering, I noticed the cracks I had never seen before. My brother, so confident and smug, stumbled over small details in conversation, mispronounced names, and exaggerated stories to appear more accomplished than he was. No one corrected him, of course. They laughed, nodded, and hung on his every word, completely oblivious to the flaws in his narrative. My parents, the ultimate arbiters of pride and status, were no less blind. Their vanity showed in the way they boasted about appearances, designer labels, and social connections, completely disconnected from substance or skill. Even their closest friends played into this, nodding, flattering, laughing at every word, reinforcing the illusion that success was measured by show alone. Watching it all unfold, I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction, a subtle power shift forming in my mind. They were blind to true competence, and in that blindness I saw opportunity. I didn't need to announce my intentions yet. It was enough to know I had clarity, insight, and the advantage of perspective. I began to see myself not as the overlooked one, but as the observer, the strategist, quietly gathering the pieces while they remained trapped in their own illusions. It all started with a call I almost didn't answer. A firm I had applied to months ago, one I'd assumed would never respond, wanted me to meet for an interview, an opportunity far beyond anything I had imagined. My heart raced as I listened, realizing this could be more than just a job. It could be the foothold I needed to change the way my family saw me. Later that week, an unexpected letter arrived, hinting at a small inheritance from a distant relative who had always admired my quiet determination. It wasn't fortune-shattering, but it was enough to plant the seed of possibility. Suddenly, everything I had endured, the favoritism, the dismissals, the countless moments of being overlooked, felt less like punishment and more like preparation. I could almost see the path forming, A way to rise without begging for recognition. A route to show, rather than tell, that I was capable. Excitement mingled with caution. The opportunity was real, but the stakes were high. For the first time, I sensed that the game had changed, that I was no longer just the background character in my family's narrative. Something significant was about to happen, and I couldn't wait to see how it would unfold. That night, I sat alone with a notebook, jotting down thoughts that had been simmering for weeks. I didn't want a rash reaction. No dramatic confrontations yet. What I needed was a strategy, a measured plan that would let me reclaim my power without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle. I listed their weaknesses, my brother's overconfidence, my parents' obsession with appearances, their blind trust in flattery. Then I listed my strengths, my education, my work ethic, my patience, my ability to see opportunities where they only saw status. I sketched scenarios, imagining subtle ways to assert myself, moments to reveal competence quietly but unmistakably, situations where their own arrogance would highlight my skills without me needing to boast. Each thought built confidence, each line on the page a small step toward empowerment. I imagined their faces when they realized the balance had shifted, when I quietly outmaneuvered expectations and assumptions. It was intoxicating. The thought of rising while they remained blind to the depth of my abilities. I could almost feel the tension building, the silent anticipation of their shock, and I knew, in my heart, that this plan would be the first real proof that I was no longer the overlooked child. Patience, timing, and precision, these were my weapons, and for the first time in years, I felt entirely in control. Over the next few weeks, I began weaving myself into circles where my skills and accomplishments could quietly shine. I attended networking events, offered insights in meetings, and connected with people who could appreciate competence rather than titles. Each interaction was deliberate. I never flaunted my achievements, but I made sure they couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, my family remained blissfully unaware. At dinners and gatherings, my parents continued boasting about my brother, dismissing my subtle successes as inconsequential. Relatives nodded politely when I mentioned new projects or promotions, but no one truly recognized the magnitude of my growth. It was maddening at first, but then I realized the advantage in their ignorance. Their underestimation was a shield I could exploit, a way to let my accomplishments speak for themselves while they remained blind. Each unnoticed victory fueled a quiet satisfaction within me, building momentum for the larger reveal. The tension grew, both for me and eventually for them, as I edged closer to the point where patience and strategy would pay off spectacularly. The next family gathering arrived, and I entered with a calmness that felt almost foreign. Gone was the flustered, overlooked version of myself. I moved with quiet confidence, observing the familiar faces that had once dismissed me so easily. My parents were already in full display mode, exchanging compliments with relatives while subtly steering conversations toward my brother's latest accomplishments. I let them chatter, smiled politely, and waited for the right moment. When the opportunity came, I didn't announce it dramatically. I simply shared that I had recently closed a significant project at work, one that had earned recognition from an influential industry leader. Eyes widened, conversations paused, and even my brother's smirk faltered for the first time. I could feel the shift in energy as whispers traveled across the room, subtle but unmistakable. My parents' pride faltered, replaced with visible confusion, and relatives leaned closer, curiosity sparking in their eyes. I maintained composure, letting their shock simmer while I quietly enjoyed the impact of my efforts being acknowledged, not through boasting, but by undeniable results. That small victory ignited something within me. Proof that competence and perseverance could speak louder than grandiose mansions or inherited advantages. For the first time, I saw the flicker of recognition in their eyes, a subtle tremor that hinted my rise had only just begun. Later that evening, the tension reached a breaking point. My parents cornered me, their voices tinged with disbelief and a hint of irritation. "So you really did all that on your own?" my father asked, the words sharp but laced with incredulity. My mother's eyes darted between me and my brother, silently judging, as though my success disrupted some unspoken hierarchy. I met their gaze steadily, a quiet pride swelling inside me. Yes, I said simply. I worked for it. No handouts, no shortcuts, just hard work and dedication. The air seemed to thicken as they struggled to reconcile the confident, accomplished version of me with the invisible child they had ignored for years. My brother tried to interject, offering excuses, diminishing my achievement, but I didn't falter. Each word I spoke felt like a small reclamation, each pause a mirror reflecting their astonishment back at them. Inside, I relished the silent recognition of the tables turning. Their vanity, their favoritism, and their shallow assessments of worth had finally collided with reality. For the first time, I felt entirely visible, entirely validated, and entirely in control. The weight of years of neglect was lifting, replaced with a calm certainty that my presence alone had rewritten the rules of this family dynamic. The moment I had been waiting for arrived sooner than anyone expected. It was a formal gathering, larger than the previous ones, filled with the same relatives and friends who had once laughed or ignored me. My parents were radiant as ever, bragging about my brother's 4-bedroom mansion and his seemingly perfect life. I let them speak, listening carefully, until the right opportunity presented itself. When someone asked casually about my own endeavors, I smiled and mentioned the acquisition I had recently finalized, a property that not only exceeded the grandeur of my brother's home, but also symbolized the years of effort, resilience, and intelligence I had quietly amassed. Gasps echoed around the room, and I noticed my parents' forced smiles faltering, replaced with visible confusion and incredulity. My brother's expression twisted into a mixture of jealousy and disbelief, his earlier arrogance crumbling under the weight of my understated triumph. I didn't boast or exaggerate. I simply let the facts speak, the numbers and achievements themselves carrying the punch. Internally, I felt a wave of satisfaction, a deep and quiet vindication that years of neglect, favoritism, and humiliation had been reversed. The room's energy shifted palpably as whispers of admiration and surprise spread, mingled with a hint of guilt and embarrassment among my parents and relatives. For the first time, I truly felt the balance of power tilt entirely in my favor. My subtle confidence, patience, and calculated actions had turned the tide. In that moment, I realized I didn't need their praise or validation to prove my worth. The recognition had come organically, undeniable and absolute. Their astonishment, their momentary loss of composure, and the silent acknowledgement of my success were more satisfying than any dramatic confrontation could have been. I had achieved not just financial or social superiority, but emotional vindication, the kind that cannot be taken away. For the first time, I felt fully seen, fully respected, and completely in control of my narrative. Later that night, after the gathering had ended and the room had emptied, I sat quietly, letting the adrenaline fade and the weight of the evening settle in. I thought about how far I had come. From the overlooked, embarrassed child at countless family events to the woman who had quietly but decisively claimed her place. The humiliation I had felt when my parents flaunted my brother's mansion now seemed distant, almost surreal. Each slight, every unnoticed effort, and every small injustice had shaped me, honed my patience, and taught me to recognize opportunity where others only saw appearances. I understood now that my worth was never defined by comparisons, applause, or inherited advantages. It had always been intrinsic, waiting for me to acknowledge it. A quiet pride swelled within me, accompanied by a sense of relief and empowerment that I had never experienced before. The journey had been long, painful, and at times lonely, but it had led to clarity, self-respect, and a deep understanding of my own resilience. In that reflective moment, I felt a cathartic release, a release not just of anger or resentment, but of the years spent doubting myself. I had not only reclaimed my place in the family's eyes, but more importantly, in my own. The days that followed were quiet, but charged with a subtle tension I could almost taste. Family gatherings felt different now. The air was thick with unspoken acknowledgement of what had shifted. My parents seemed humbled, their usual arrogance tempered by the awareness that I had quietly outpaced their expectations. My brother, once so smug and untouchable, now wore a cautious expression, a mix of resentment and grudging respect. Some relatives whispered behind their hands, recalculating the hierarchy they had always assumed, while others approached me with a newfound curiosity, eager to understand the woman who had so effortlessly rewritten the rules. Through it all, I maintained my composure, never gloating, never seeking to humiliate. My satisfaction was quiet but profound. I had proven my worth without compromising my integrity, and that in itself was the ultimate triumph. Reflecting on the journey from humiliation to empowerment, I realized that the true victory wasn't the property, the accolades, or even the shock in their eyes. It was the reclaiming of my dignity, the acknowledgement of my resilience, and the quiet certainty that I would no longer be defined by their favoritism. As I looked around at the subtly altered family dynamic, I felt a sense of relief and peace, knowing that I had turned years of neglect into a story of personal triumph. The balance had shifted, lessons had been silently learned, and I had emerged not only victorious but centered, strong and fully myself, leaving everyone, including the viewers witnessing this journey, both satisfied and reflective.